Today I'll be upgrading my spoiler and installing this one on my 2024 Acura Integra Type S. I bought this spoiler from Artwork Bodyshop. This is the V2 spoiler, which is taller and more aggressive than the original spoiler without being over the top. Acura offers an optional accessory spoiler, but it's not as aggressive, and this one also costs about half the price of Acura's accessory spoiler. These are made to order, so it takes about a month or two to arrive. They can be made in matte black, gloss black, color matched to your car, or carbon fiber. I opted for the gloss black. It came very well padded in a large box along with the installation hardware. Let's get started. Here you can see my original spoiler and how small and basic it looks. I placed the artwork spoiler on top so you can see how much taller and more aggressive it looks in comparison. We'll start by opening the hatch and removing these two grommets with a plastic trim removal tool. We'll also remove the two grab handles on either side of the center latch. This will get us access to the bolts and clips holding the spoiler in. There are 3 clips on either side and 1 bolt on each side behind the grommets we pulled off. There is one last clip in the center, but we'll get to that later. We'll start by taking an 8mm socket and removing the nuts at either end. Be careful not to drop the nut. Pro tip, I wrap the inside of my socket with some painter's tape to help add a little friction and grip the nut. When I flip it, the nut doesn't go anywhere. Next, I took my plastic trim removal tool and pried at the edges of the spoiler. There is a small adhesive pad holding it in place on either side, probably about an inch long. Using a plastic tool here helps to avoid scratching your paint. Gently push at the pad bit by bit until the whole pad is off your car, and repeat for the other side. Next, we need to remove the clips holding the spoiler in. I found it hard to reach in through the handle openings, so I removed some more trim to get better access. I started by removing the cargo area's privacy cover. Start by undoing these 2 clips and then pull the back corners straight out. After that, I removed this plastic cover by prying it with my trim tool. Behind the cover, there is a plastic fastener holding the trim piece to the car. There is a notch in the side of the fastener where it needs to be gently pried, and then the fastener comes right out. I pried at the edge of the trim to remove some clips holding it in place. I thought I needed to remove these 2 clips, but turns out there was no need. They just hold the wiring harness in place, which you'll see soon. I removed these rubber grommets on either side of the trim. Through the handle openings, you can see there are a few clips holding the trim in place. Also, this upper piece is helping to hold the trim and needs to be popped out first. That piece has a green clip holding it to the hatch. Finally, I reached under the trim toward the window and pulled down to free the clips from the car, and the trim came right out. Here you can see how many clips there are. Here are those 2 wiring harness clips on either side that I mentioned earlier that we didn't need to remove. I simply popped them back in. Now that the trim is removed, you can see there's a lot more room to work with. I can stick my hand through this opening and have easier access to the spoiler clips. I took my trim tool and used the forked end to squeeze both sides of the clip and push them through. I started from the outside edges and worked my way toward the center. The final clip was this white one in the center of the spoiler. To access this one, I had to reach through the center opening here and use my trim tool to remove it the same way as the others. Now the spoiler just comes right off. We'll need to clean the dirt and remove these rubber seals. They just peel right off. To get the dirt off, I used a shop towel and some soapy water. The Artwork spoiler had these little feet at either side to help protect the corners. These are each held in with 2 Phillips head screws and need to be removed. The spoiler came with some clear pads that are used to cover up the unused holes. I flipped the spoiler upside down and held it up against the hatch to determine which holes will be unused. The only ones we'll be using are the first and third holes from the outside. The rest will need to be sealed off with these pads. Simply place the pad over the hole and squeeze out any air bubbles. The next step is to align the spoiler on the hatch and hand thread the 2 outer bolts. Don't be a nincompoop like me and drop your bolt into the hatch. Because of this, I took off the upper trim to go looking for it. This involved taking off these plastic covers to get to the screws underneath. I actually pried from the wrong side. These clips that hold it in place need to be popped off and it opens upward. Here you can see the screw that needs to be removed. Once those were out, I gently pulled along the trim to undo the clips holding it in place. The trim is holding a wiring harness here, so that needs to be pulled out. It simply slides out from under this cap. There was no opening at the top to look for the bolt, so all that work was pointless. What I did instead was shake the hatch up and down in hopes that the bolt would slide back down to where I could reach it. Lo and behold, there it was. Getting back on track, now that both edge bolts were hand threaded, I grabbed some painter's tape and masked off the hatch around the edges of the spoiler. This doesn't have to be perfect. The spoiler came with an automotive adhesion promoter, which needs to be applied on the hatch under the spoiler. This stuff smells like cement and should help the spoiler stick to the hatch. Next, I peeled back about 1 inch of adhesive from the front and back edges on either side of the spoiler. I aligned the spoiler with the tape and then hand threaded the 4 bolts. Now that everything is where it needs to be, we can peel off the adhesive backing from both the front and back edge. Push the spoiler down to help it stick, and then tighten the 4 10mm bolts. I started with a socket screwdriver and then went back and retightened with a ratchet for more leverage. Finally, I peeled off the painter's tape. The last step is to reinstall all the trim you removed. For this upper trim, remember to tuck the wiring harness under this tab first, then you can align it and pop all the clips back in. Put these screws back in and close the covers. For installing the lower trim, it helps to first pop out these 2 clips in the upper trim. This will make it easier to slide the lower trim underneath the upper trim so they can snap together. Align both sides and then pop in some of the clips along the center edge. Next, pop the green clip on the upper trim in and pop the 2 trim pieces together. Notice right here there is a small gap between the trim pieces. If you experience this, it helps to stick your trim tool behind the lower trim up here and lightly pry up while at the same time pushing down on the upper trim piece here with your hand. They should easily pop into place. Do the same thing on the other side. Secure the center of the lower trim by reinserting the plastic clip. Press the top piece in to lock it in place, and then reinstall the plastic cover. Next, reinstall the grommets for the privacy cover on either side. After that, reinstall the grab handles. Don't be an idiot like me and install them the wrong way. They'll go in, but they'll be very difficult to get out. The correct way to install them is to match these two tabs at the top with the notches in the opening. Finally, we can reinstall the grommets covering the outer bolts, as well as the privacy cover. Slide the pointed clips into the grommets on either side toward the back, and then snap the cover into these hangers at the front. Last but certainly not least, close the hatch, step back, and appreciate your work. That is how you install a new spoiler on the Acura Integra Type S. Thanks for watching.